available countrywide, and that there has been a persistent shortages of medicines for the whole year. And of the 53.1% medicines that they found available, these are donated medicines, such as those for HIV and AIDS, ARVs, for TB drugs, and for vaccines, you know, polio vaccines and vaccines for children. To save lives, they've been such a critical factor to our cooperating partners that they took that intervention, that subvention from the Zambian government, and they donate ARVs, and they donate TB drugs, they donate anti-malarial, they donate vaccines. These were the medicines that were available. So the 13 essential medicines that the Ministry of Health should send to a health center as a pack were totally unavailable for the whole year. This is a serious crisis of great proportion. I was amused the other day. I saw Honorable W.K. Mtalenalumanga, our Vice President, claim that there are medicines where she has been, and she was shocked that the medicines are available and people are saying they are not available. Well, Honorable Nalumanga, maybe they showed you the ARVs which are donated. Yes, those are available at our health centers, usually 24 hours. The ARVs, the TB drugs are available. The anti-malaria are available because they are donated drugs. The vaccines for our children are available because they are donated drugs. But the painkillers, the antibiotics, the medical supplies for, you know, gloves for our doctors, cotton wool, spirit, or whatever you want that our doctors use is not available.
So where do you feel lies the problem generally? Is it a lack of political will, or is the situation perhaps being blown out of proportion by stakeholders such as you?
No, not at all. I think partly 90% of this crisis arises from the decision of the minister herself and the government. She abolished the procurement system. Now, this is a procurement system that has been established for many years. Okay, remember, the Ministry of Health, like the Ministry of Agriculture, I'll come to it, enjoy a lot of support and financial and technical support from cooperating partners. So in the manner that they set up medical stores of Zambia and the procurement system at Ministry of Health and the various directorates, this was a working machine of many moving parts. We even amended the law from medical stores to Zambia Medical and Medical Supplies, you know, authority, to ensure that the work for delivery of medicine was done timely, was done regularly, and that there was no shortages, and also to prevent the expiry of drugs, because you would see millions of dollars worth of drugs expiring. So the procurement system has been a result of many years of perfection. She just came and abolished it, and she said the suppliers are PF. She disrupted a working system that has been working for many years. So even if you buy medicines today, it may not be available because you've disrupted the process, the distribution mechanism, and the stocking levels in how they are done. The satellite, we had so much medicine under the PF that you had to create satellite storage facilities in Mongu, in Mansa, in Kasama, in Chipata, in Choma. We had so much medicines that you needed even to stock at provincial levels. They have had no medicines even to stock at national level. So the minister disrupted a working system over a petty and narrow perspective that you businessmen, you are PF. Now, hence the crisis. Then just general supervision. If medical equipment is not working, if the cancer hospital, the cancer hospital at UTH, which even attracts patients from Malawi, DRC, and Angola, they come to that, it hasn't been working properly the last 1 year. Again, no medicines, equipment. CAT scan is not working, this CT scan is not working, MRI is not working, this particular test is not working, and medicines for cancers is very expensive. It has become like a death foyer, the cancer disease hospital. Why haven't they attended to it all of this year? So for us, the issue of health, and I've spent deliberate time on it, is that this is one of the biggest crises our people are facing. Mukwima, we come to Ministry of Agriculture, where there has been the biggest failure. Again, because of regular interference by the president. And he boasts about it at his press conferences. He also disrupted the supply chain there. He said the suppliers were PF. By the time they were processing and completing the purchase of farmer input support program, the fertilizers and seeds, it was September. Now, under the PF, fertilizer and seeds will be available at provincial centers and district, in those warehouses and sheds. By May, this government was completing the procurement process in September, a process that should have been done January, February, and completed by then. So hence the crisis, where fertilizer is not available to our people. Yes, money has been disbursed, contractors have been paid, but fertilizer is not available because this is a bulk commodity. To transport it, we don't manufacture it. You have to get it from Saudi Arabia, you have to get it from Iran, you have to get it from Ukraine, which is under war. Bring it over the sea, that's minimum 6 weeks. Then transport it from your ports, whether you are using Beira, whether you are using Deben, whether you are using Dar es Salaam. And these are thousands and thousands of bags. Bring them to Lusaka then for distribution countrywide. It's just not possible. So they bungled. The fertilizer that you saw our people get was mostly fertilizer that was left over by previous suppliers that was available in the country. And we have had this crisis, which threatens our national security next year, our food security next year, and the beneficiaries of the FISI program, over 1 million of our smallholder farmers who suffer lack of resource because they, remember, they earn once a year. Their income comes once a year. This has been disrupted. And then we saw the sad part where fertilizer was being shared on medals and on small buckets. Seeds were being shared on small medals and buckets. That goes to tell you the crisis that 2023 will face. I agree with a report from both the IMF and World Bank, where they've categorized that Zambia is among countries that will suffer critical food shortage in 2023. I agree. Because in the manner we have bungled the agricultural sector. And sadly, this is by a leadership that says they are farmers. So how can farmers fail to understand basic issues? So we have a crisis in...
So now, Ambassador Mwamba, amid these challenges, especially in these two critical sectors, in the health as well as in the agriculture, one thing that has generally come out so often from the president and from the government is on them raising alarm in regards to the procurement system. And the alarm and concern has been that the previous government had really messed up this procurement system, and to an extent that, according to the president's words, that people could supply air, could supply nothing, and yet they were paid. And as a result of trying to sort out these legacy issues, we find that these sectors now find themselves where we are now in terms of the agriculture, in terms of health. But as stakeholders, have you taken time perhaps to maybe analyze the concern that the president has raised in regards to the procurement system? Do you feel there is basis in what the president has always said in regards to this?
I've always stated that the president suffers ignorance on how government works, and therefore he makes generalized statements and assumes conclusions that are usually false. Our procurement system has undergone various changes since 2008. If you look at the Zambia National Tender Board at the time and the National Tender Act, it was amended and it has gone through various amendments that saw the creation of the Zambia Public Procurement Authority. We still need some more reforms, but essentially our procurement system is up to speed. And remember, this is a procurement system that has been supported by the World Bank and IMF, and they've ensured that it's transparent, it's open, but it's efficient, and it's also performance related, that by the time you are spending public finance, public money, that delivery has been done. In the past, you could build a road and get paid and get away with it. For now, when you are building, you need to produce an interim certificate to show the work that has been done, and before it is paid, someone has to certify. There will be weaknesses in the systems where there are dishonest people, where an engineer certifies works that haven't occurred. There will be those isolated cases, and we've seen in the Auditor General's report where the system is rigged to the benefit maybe of the corrupt outcome, where someone says they're building a school and an engineer comes and certifies works that have not been done. I personally, as Permanent Secretary, ensured, faced those circumstances and ensured that that was not done. If an interim certificate for payment comes, I needed to ensure that it's verified and that what you are paying for is for the works that were done. So, by and large, the procurement system is quite a perfect system. The president believes that this system doesn't work. That is why for 1.5 years, he has failed to pay contractors and suppliers because he thinks they didn't do the work. He thinks that the bills and claims that are before government are false, that people supplied air. Like I've stated, there will be isolated cases like that. But the general and bulk of it is that your system is quite good. No permanent secretary will sign a payment that is bogus or that will supply air. People need to understand the process even of procuring in government. For example, that's why they're having difficulties to access CDF money, because they want to jump the process where you want to give cooperatives and cadres money just like that, or contracts. Government has systems and procedures that you must follow. You just can't say because the president says we give CDF money, we should release it. No, but what are the procedures of procurement? What happens to prevent audit? What about the pre-audit requirement? What about the verification of works? You just can't come today as a cooperative. If the Zambian laws and government regulations require that you must have worked for 3 years for you to access that money, how will a controlling officer give you, who have registered 3 days ago as a cooperative, give you such monies? And if they give you such money, someone will bear responsibility in the future because the regulations have not been.
Back on the other side.
Thank you.
Yes, you can hold on to your thoughts or get back to it just right after the break. We need to pay our bills. This is Tuesday's edition of the interview on Millennium Radio. Our guest is PF presidential aspirant Emmanuel Mwamba. We'll be back on the other side when we also open the phone line so that we can also interact. For now, let us go on a break. We'll be back.
How long is the break?
About 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, dear listeners, for those that are live, we will be going, we are on commercial break. You know, when you are live on radio, they have to have these intermittent breaks to run adverts and to help us catch a breath. But Mukwima brought up something very important about the procurement system. I hold that the procurement system is quite perfect, but it requires amendments. And, you know, that's why it's been an ongoing process to amend the law. But in government, to supply air in government, it's a quite difficult process. But there will be some that will attempt to do so. But it requires a collaboration of an entire system, from accounts department, procurement department, administrative department, and finally, you know, for the cashiers to issue those checks or payment. So it's a very long, laborious system. And to rig that system, unless the entire chain is collaborating, it's quite difficult to deliver air. Overpriced goods, yes, because people know that there's a list issued by ZPPA, you know, and they might mark their prices to the something like that they can get away with. You buy. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll be back. We're taking yes to do a news.
Headlines.
Yes, Reaper Stock Feed has it all for your broiler chicks. Find us at plot number 2055 Coach Nika Industrial Area off Mumba Road, Lusaka. In all outlets, look around for Reaper Stock Feed. To find out more, call us on 0953 604050 or 0971 864700. Reaper Stock Feed, the feed masters.
Good morning. It's 11 hours. This is Millennium Radio to the news headlines.
To present the headlines, my name is Mwamba Timothy Jilalam. Civil Society Organization Decentralization Alliance Network, CSODAN, has called on government to decentralize the fight against corruption by engaging civil society organizations in fighting the vice. The Zambia National Women's Lobby has demanded for the immediate establishment of the Gender Equity and Equality Commission, whose powers and functions provides for the taking of measures to ensure gender equality and equity. Palestinians have condemned a visit to the contested holy site in Jerusalem by a far-right Israeli minister as unprecedented provocation. That ends the headlines.
Done?
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. So, dear listeners and viewers, we'll be going back live to our radio program, our first in the year, and thanks to Millennium Radio and Millennium TV that are covering this matter. I think it's a difficult year ahead. Cost of living might rise higher. We hope that government will attend to the issues of the economy quickly. Okay, you tell me when you are ready.
Sure. Just, I think, 2 minutes.
Okay. The IMF is waiting, that bailout is waiting for the creditors committee. The creditors committee hasn't settled on fundamental issues. For China, for example, they are saying their loans is owed to their commercial entities, the banks, Exim Bank. And there was an attempt that there should be a huge write-off and that China should bear the big burden of writing off that debt. But China says it's also a commercial debt. It's not a commercial, it's a commercial loan. I think under the creditors arrangement, what we are hearing is that they wanted that commercial loan from China owned by Exim Bank turned to a sovereign loan. That way it is easier for China to write it off. But why would China take those proposals by the Zambian government if you are far warm to the US than you are warm to China? So I have personally called for the president to undertake a state visit to China, I think, to ensure that our debt is resolved. So far, China has cooperated very well with the Zambian government. It's part of the creditors committee. They are co-chairing with France, who represents the Paris Club and the Euro bond, and we are watching that space. A deadline has been given for April. that we hope that that will be done by April. Okay, we go live now.
Just immediately after this one.
Okay, thank you.
All right, welcome back. This is our Tuesday's edition of the interview on Millennium Radio, and once more I'm your host, Mugwema Timothy Jilala. Our guest on the program this morning is the Patriotic Front Presidential Aspirant Ambassador Emmanuel Mwamba. We are discussing a number of issues pertaining the governance of this country, simply put, the current state of affairs in Zambia. Welcome back, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our dear listeners and viewers.
All right. So before going on a break, we were discussing, you were on the floor, touching on a very critical issue, which is the issue of procurement. It has, the president has made so much emphasis in regards to the procurement system in our government. And the impression perhaps that one may have is that the Patriotic Front administration round down the procurement system, ran a procurement system that perhaps only favored politically connected individuals or rather politically exposed persons, perhaps, and a system that perhaps a system that, maybe for lack of a better term, had a number of pilferage in it. I would want to categorically get your school of thought in regards to this.
So I was, So Timothy, I was reviewing recent literature. There's a document that has been done by the World Bank on the energy sector and on attempts to invite independent power producers, and then the corruption surrounding it. And for me, it highlights what needs to be done. First, in the broad spectrum, as soon as we changed from one-party state to multi-party state, and when we changed from a central economy that was state-owned to a liberal driven by the private sector, new risks emerged. And one of them was, for example, the rise of entrepreneurs, these very well-connected individuals that will ensure that they get these large-scale contracts from government, because the biggest spender in any economy is government. That's where your biggest money comes from. So there are people that specialize in ensuring that they get these tenders. So the document does even demonstrate how to overcome this. The other issue, like I said, you have to consider it in the political economic sector, where politicians, to be in politics is very expensive, where politicians want to feed off businessmen, and the businessmen tell you, no, but what is in it for me? So if he's a minister, says, I'll give you a tender, or I'll support this program for you. So these are genuine risks. And that's why I traced the amendments that have been done to our procurement system from 1998, when we were the Zambia Tender Board and Zambia, National Tender Act, to the current Zambia Public Procurement Authority, and the various amendments that have gone through 2008 and the 20 in procuring goods and services, value for goods and services, contracts that are performance related, not just paying people for equipment that is not moving, because we still have those provisions. If you don't pay me on time, I can charge you interest. While I'm not working, you've given me a road to do, I can actually accumulate even the value more than the cost of the road while my equipment is parked. There are those provisions, and they need to be amended and changed. So someone who doesn't understand the system, for example, those provisions were made to punish government because government has a habit of commissioning projects that they are not paying for. You see a project lying for 10 years. So a proposal was put that if government gives me, I am a private sector person, and I have bills to pay. So if you give me a contract to build a school in 14 months, I will ensure I will borrow even against my assets to build the school, but then you take 10 years to pay me. So there were these punitive clauses that were introduced that if you do not pay on time, you'll be paying interest on my claims, maybe per month so much. So a person who doesn't understand the procurement system, who doesn't understand where we are coming from 1991, will just come and say, your equipment is parked. You have not done even a kilometer of the road. Why are we paying you so much? They will not understand the thinking behind those clauses that were made for government to pay its bills on time. And therefore, you have these contractors and suppliers you are paying without doing work. It's flawed. I don't support it. But there was a reason that was created. So you have to understand the history and where we are. But our president, sadly, just comes and says, no, they were supplying air.
The procurement system under the PF was not at its worst in terms of corruption, in terms of pilferage.
No, we need to recognize that we are fighting corruption in this country. And I need to make that very clear, because I'm one of those people that fight corruption. I don't tolerate corruption, even in all offices that I've occupied. And I ensure that pilferage, theft, fraud doesn't take place. In fact, what I do as soon as I arrive at a station, I commission an audit so that I start on a clean slate. When I leave, someone can also come and look at the work that I've done. It's very imperative that we demonstrate that corruption is a cancer we are fighting in this country. It's entrenched. It is sophisticated. We need to recognize that. But also we need to recognize the other factors. That out of unfounded political fears, I can just say, Emmanuel, you are PF and your companies are PF. Without looking at whether I can deliver. I can be a PF member, but my company runs professionally. It delivers professionally, delivers quality service. I'm a Zambian, I'm entitled to these services. But again, from a government perspective, I should ensure that I'm not supporting or giving you a contract because you are PF. I'm giving you a contract because you merit it. That is why, under the PF, the people you call UPND had contracts. Alpha Commodities, associated with President Hakainde Hichilema, family friends, close friends, used to get business to tendered for fertilizer, and they would get allotments. Everyone knew the association of Alpha Commodities to the president. But you take a professional decision. This is a company run by a Zambian, a professional Zambians, and he has a history in this sector. He has specialized in this sector. Why can't you give it to him if he's able to deliver? For me, that's a leadership I want that rises above these partisan ethnic interests. You just can't come to Ministry of Health and say, all these suppliers are PF, and you abandon them. And you begin to give Egyptians and other foreigners these contracts, abandoning your own people, refusing to leave resources in your country. That is, for me, where my contention is. And even when we fight corruption, we should ensure that we are fighting it not in a narrow perspective. So the procurement process remains an evolving process to perfect it. And even the tenderpreneurs also perfect the systems. They know how to beat it. Corrupt civil servants who look at the loophole. Let me give you an example. This year, large-scale contracts have been done under what you call single sourcing, direct bidding. You know why? Because there's a new law that was passed in 2020, an amendment to the Zambia Procurement Act of 2020, which says all payment, all contracts from government must be given to Zambians first. Citizen-owned companies. Whether you are buying fertilizer, whether you are buying medicines, whether you are building a road, since 2020 there is a law that says go to national tender and ensure that you give it to citizen-owned. Do you know who's fighting it? It's your political administrators and your politicians. They don't want to give contracts to Zambians. I can start with ZESCO. ZESCO is spending $107 million on wooden poles. They chose single sourcing because the law says you have to go to national tender and give it to citizen-owned companies. That's your first priority. But if you go under direct bidding, you can just justify, no, there is emergency, we are in a hurry. And therefore then choose, like ZESCO chose 10 foreign companies, Zimbabweans and South African companies, abandoning your own people. And $107 million has gone to Zimbabwean and South African companies. Fertilizer, same thing. A national public tender process has been done. You cancel it. Because all the 6 that have been picked are Zambians, according to the new law. You have to give Zambians this tender, any subvention from parliament, any money that is coming in the national budget. Your priority should be citizens first. But these politicians then recognize that they are big buyers, they are big supporters, who will then not give them these monies that have been given. Others owe them to repay them. And for me, the biggest thing that has happened to this country is that law. That law that says citizen-owned first. For any government money that is being spent, you have to give it to a citizen-owned company. So we saw in the fertilizer sector, they've circumvented it. We've seen in the fuel sector, they've circumvented it. So you continue, in the health sector, you continue to spend millions of dollars on foreign companies at the expense of your own company. The report I referred to, the parliamentary committee report on health and education, there were sadly some recommendations that I didn't agree with. They said, no, don't give. In there, they've recommended that we shouldn't give to local suppliers the importation of drugs, the supply of drugs. You know why? They're saying our local people have no capacity.
But do they have that capacity?
They do. All they need is a contract. You know, there is this self-hate we have as a people, where we think that our people have no capacity. We are glad to give Egyptians those millions of dollars of contract and not to a Zambian. We think that a Zambian has no capacity. How will you build the capacity in a Zambian? If the Zambian doesn't have capacity, it's because you have not given them the contract. Okay. You know, if you give me a contract worth $10 million to supply medicine, even if I've registered my company today, when you give me that contract, you have given me capacity. Because with that contract, I can go to a bank. It's a bankable document. The bank can lend me money, maybe $3-4 million to obtain my first supplies, and I supply to. I can even connect it in a manner that no money comes to me, it goes to the supplier and to the drugs are supplied straight to ZAMSA or Ministry of Health. We need to create capacity. If you give me to do portions of the road of maybe Lusaka Kabwe Road, you say I have no capacity. When you give me that contract, you've created capacity. I can even subcontract a Chinese, because that's what happens. There is nothing wrong with me getting capacity. I can get a South African company to come and work under me. I'm building capacity in myself and in my local enterprise while I'm, bringing these technologies. I don't know why there is this self-hate about our people, where we fight each other, where we don't want another Zambian to succeed. Here is a law that is very clear that you have to give all money that is budgeted for. Your priority should be for a national tender, especially for large-scale contracts, and give them to citizen-owned. Okay. They are fighting it again and again.
All right. Let us move on to another policy that I would want us to review in the just ended year. And this one, I believe that is something that I think is also close to, and this is the new Dawn administration's foreign policy. You spent about 7 years or so as a diplomat, and obviously you are well vested in issues of foreign policy. The president, on a number of times, has been on record saying that Zambia is back in the League of Nations, or rather in the Champions League, and this is in regards to Zambia's standing with on the international scene or with other foreign cooperating partners. I want to get your take. Generally, what do you make of the new Donald administration's foreign policy? And I want you to marry it with perhaps, firstly, the IMF, Zambia's creditors, the West, as well as the East.
I was rather surprised when I heard the president claim that Zambia is back in the League of Nations. Well, Mr. President, Zambia has been in the League of Nations for the longer period that you can imagine. I know the president spent a lot of time scandalizing Zambia abroad. If you look at his speeches in South Africa or wherever he went, he spent a lot of time scandalizing the government then, and in many cases there was a narrow, in his criticism there was a narrow perspective. Instead of criticizing government, he literally rubbished Zambia. So it is difficult for him now to come and be the one to tell a good story of Zambia. Because a good story of Zambia is that you have Kenneth Kaunda, who created a strong foundation where Zambia is respected abroad. I was a diplomat for 7 years. We are well respected in South Africa, in UK, at the United Nations. When you sit as an ambassador among your peers, they want to listen to Zambia. When I was at the African Union, they wanted to listen to Zambia. I was an ambassador of great and immense influence. Not just because of I can't say because I'm wise or I'm intelligent, I'm what, but I recognize the foundation that was laid by Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. That's why at my embassy, I could have the Chinese ambassador, the Russian ambassador, the US ambassador, the British ambassador would visit me. You saw those posts. And they would come for consultations. I was always humbled when these big nations spent a lot of time at my embassy. And the big countries in Africa, South Africa, Senegal, Nigeria, were always at my embassy consulting on policy issues of our country. I recognize it was the foundation laid by Dr. Kaunda. It's not the brilliance of Emmanuel Mwamba. It's not, well, I could have brought something to the table, but I need to recognize the larger perspective that here is a country that is well respected. That's why they trooped to my embassy to understand what we're doing, what was good for Africa, what was the perspective of Zambia. And sometimes my fellow ambassadors say, look, I've been here 3-4 years. I've never received an American ambassador at my residence or at my embassy. I've never received the Russian ambassador at my residence or at my embassy. How do you do it? And I'll tell them, Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. Because Dr. Kenneth Kaunda laid a very strong foreign policy. He was comfortable in New York and Washington. He was comfortable in Moscow. He was comfortable in Beijing. He was comfortable in Delhi. He was comfortable wherever he was, in Addis Ababa. Dr. Kaunda's policies and views and leaders like him, the Nyereres, the Ben Bellas and the Kwame Nkrumahs, they elevated their nations and Africa to such a great extent. So, Mr. President, Zambia is well respected. It's not back anywhere. It's not back anywhere. The president needs to be reminded. He is not being received well because he's President Hakainde Hichilema. He should recognize that the work has been done by previous president. In 1992, Dr. Kaunda was feted on no capitals. Dr. Chiluba was feted on no capitals because he is a new president that had defeated this well-respected man in a democratic dispensation. And here is Dr. Kaunda, who handed over power to Dr. Chiluba. So Africa wanted to learn something from both Dr. Kaunda and Dr. Chiluba. And you saw the great speeches that Dr. Chiluba gave, whether it was Senegal, Dakar, whether it was in Belgium, whether it was at the United Nations. He was received, in Washington, and he gave the addresses to those universities. You should go back. And you see Dr. Chiluba go to China, he goes to the Bahamas, he goes to... You saw a president being celebrated You never heard President Chiluba say Zambia is back. He recognized as a country that there's something we are doing quite okay, both by the previous government and the current government. And the way to usher in a new dispensation, again, that is what Africa celebrates. When President Hakainde Hichilema won elections, he was celebrated in the same manner. Here is an opposition leader that has won the incumbent ruling party, and power has transferred in a peaceful manner, without conflict, it's a process they celebrate for both President Edgar Lungu and Hakainde Hichilema. It's not because of Hakainde Hichilema that's why they are celebrating him. It's not because he's a brilliant man or he speaks well. No. It's a process which is an example to Africa that democratic contestation can take place. And it can take place, the will of the people can be established without going to war, without deteriorating into civil conflict. And that institutions, democratic institutions such as the ECZ, can deliver the will of our people without being cowed into submission, without being forced to change their position. And they are mere midwives to the will of the people, and they just deliver this child called democracy. And the beneficiary was, in this case, President Hakainde Hichilema. It doesn't make him any brighter, any brilliant. So that perspective must be told to the president. You are benefiting from a process. If ECZ said, no, we are PF, even if he has won, we are changing, and they announced different results, what could have happened? Would Africa have celebrated Zambia? No. If President Edgar Lungu said, by ECZ, if you're not from election that not true, changing now, would Zambia be celebrated? Is because of the resilience of our institutions. The army stands still. What is the will of our people? ECZ carries out as midwives the wishes of our people. And this has happened 3 times. Dr. Kenneth Kaunda and Dr. Chiluba, President Rupia Banda and Michael Sata, and Edgar Lungu and Hakainde Hichilema. So I get surprised when the president keeps on praising himself. He's in this world where he thinks that Zambia is privileged to have him, that Zambia is lucky that they have a leader like him. It should be the other way. That he should be happy that he has a people like Zambians, that he has institutions like Zambians, that we are growing our democracy. It's not about him. He's not back anywhere, in any league. We should make that very clear. He's not back in any league. Zambia is not back in any way. We are not back in any Champions League. We should be very, very clear.
All right. Now, let us...
You ask an issue of IMF, World Bank, and... China. Okay. So, here comes the President Michael Sata, who recognizes that we have not invested in infrastructure for the last almost 50 years. The last time there was massive infrastructure was under Dr. Kenneth Kaunda in the 70s, when we built all the trunk roads to our provincial capitals, when we built the bridges, when we built the new airports, when we built a university. University of Zambia was done in 1967. CBU was a college which was upgraded in the 80s. Clearly, President Michael Sata made the correct judgment. He said, we have to develop this country. We just can't be talking about economic factors and economic growth, posting good numbers, but we have bad roads. We have no hospitals. We have no schools. Our population has grown from 3 million, now it's at 14 million. That was 2011. It's at 14 million. We need to upgrade our infrastructure that can carry our people. Hence, a massive infrastructure development you saw. In schools, in hospitals, 110 secondary schools were built. Because our people, there were few secondary schools. Some districts didn't even have a secondary school. Boarding schools were few, the last ones that were built in the 70s. There was a huge expansion. I can guarantee, even a district like Congo, on the borderline with Angola, has a secondary school. Things that was unheard of. So President Michael Sata laid that foundation. And the last 10 years, we built schools. We expanded classroom spaces for primary schools up to 14,000. If you remember at 1x3 classroom blocks, you had a lot of those. Because if you have a secondary school, there was an expansion that was done. a 1x3 classroom was done, or 1x6 classroom was done. This was to expand classrooms. 14,000 was done. We had an old airport. Zambia has potential to become a hub. South Africa is too far, Addis Ababa is too far. In between here, there is no proper international airport and no proper hub. We said we should build an international airport. In fact, 3. You have Harry Mwanga Nkumbula, we have Simon Mwanzaka Pwepwe, and you have Kenneth Kaunda International Airport. This is a good foundation for a country to become an aviation giant if you are looking at it in the long term. We had 1,600 megawatts of power in our country. You couldn't even sufficiently meet the demands of the mines. President Michael Sata said, no, Bazesco, you've had plans for the last 30, 40 years. What are your plans? Cyprian Chitundu, who was managing director at the time, brought the plans. Yes, Mr. President, there have been plans after plans, and we deliver. We give them to our energy ministers and we give them to our presidents. They are not done. What needs to be done? He says, Kafue, Lower Gorge. This has capacity to go even up to 1,000 megawatts because of the terrain, the topography, and the Kafue River itself is evergreen. He says, we'll start with that project. He says there are minor upgrades because you have 0.75 hydropower stations littered across the country. Mr. Sata said, let's do them. So you saw us upgrade Lunzua in Impulungu. It was a 0.75 megawatts. It's 15 megawatts. It's even supplying power now to Tanzania, to Sumbawanga. In Serenje, we have Lusiwashi. We've created Lusiwashi 1, upgraded it, Lusiwashi 2. The entire northwestern province was on generators. Sometimes people forget that. Other than Mwinilunga and Solwezi. Is it Kasempa and Solwezi? The rest were on generator sets. President Sata commissioned National Grid to reach up to Zambezi. And all the 7 districts that were outside the National Grid are now on National Grid. We created a new dam. And we upgraded Iteji Dam to 120 megawatts. And then the big one on Kafue, 750 megawatts. This was a visionary leadership. But what's your resource envelope? Timothy, our resource envelope is very limited. What's your national budget per year? It's between 5 billion to 8 billion. It's not possible that you could have done this fundamental infrastructure development with the current national budget and the current domestic revenue. Hence the borrowing that took place to do the roads in Lusaka that you are enjoying. To have, in fact, we are not supposed to have load shedding. Not to have load shedding. Critical investment was done. To take power, I heard the president saying we have to do an interconnector to our neighboring states. I laughed, said, Mr. President, just update yourself. We've done most of the interconnectors. For example, we've upgraded the power line from Serenje up to Kasama. Is an industrial line from 11 kV, a small 11 kV, Kwatinikana kama telephone poles. It's now those giant lines. We've done the same from Kafue to Livingstone. We've done the same from Serenje across, to Chipata, taking it to Mwami border. The connectors are already in place for our export of power. And we are already exporters of power through the southern power pool. So when you hear the president says we are back in the league, he said, Mr. President, we just may need to update yourself. The PF failed, not because they didn't work. The PF were booted out of power mostly because of arrogance, because of cadres, because of political violence. They were not booted because they didn't work.
All right. But you've not attended to the question. What do you make of Zambia's current relations, firstly with China, with the UK, with the European Union, and with the US? There has been some observation that perhaps Zambia is playing itself, or is being played as a pawn in some, perhaps for lack of a better term, some conflict or trade wars, or I think for lack of a better term, some conflicts between the West and China.
We cautioned the president to take the stance that has always been taken by Dr. Kenneth Kaunda and by subsequent 5 other presidents, which is a non-aligned policy. We don't lean to the west, we don't lean to the east. We don't lean to the north, we don't lean to the south. We have a non-aligned policy, established foreign policy, where we are comfortable in New York and Washington, and China will not raise an issue. Where we are comfortable in Beijing, and Washington will not raise an issue. Where we are comfortable in Moscow, and UK, London will not raise an issue. Where we are comfortable, whether it's Western Sahara or Pretoria, they know we are non-aligned. They know we bring people together. We don't participate in their conflicts.
That Zambia has become aligned.
Yes, it's and I'll demonstrate.
Okay.
President Hakainde Hichilema has taken it to the far right. He's leaning to the west. Maybe he was desperate for an IMF program. I don't understand. He's been to Washington and New York more than he has been anywhere else. The recent signing of a battery value chain for the electric vehicle is a case in point. Why would you sign such an agreement with the US? Why don't we sign an agreement between DRC and ourselves and then sell batteries, whether it's to China, to Russia, or to the US? Why should we lock in the US? US is a major power. The electric vehicle industry is a new industry that has emerged. Combustion vehicles will be done away with. There are deadlines, 2025, 2030, and 2040. Combustion vehicles using petrol and diesel have to be done away with. You have to have either hydrogen or electric batteries. So it's these two technologies that are being pursued. And Zambia, you know, like David Livingstone says, will be a hope for a light for the whole world. This is what we are. We'll be a light for the whole world. We have cobalt. We have copper. Like DRC, we have cobalt, they have copper. Zimbabwe and Eba have lithium. All the components required for EV batteries. In fact, Zambia has manganese, which is also a component to the EV batteries. Why would you align yourself with the US? The US is looking at energy security. They know this technology is here because you have to fight climate change. You have to abandon combustion engines. You have to abandon fossil fuels. You have to use green energy. You have to transition. And the transition is underway. Why would you lock your resources to the US? The biggest, at the moment, the biggest in EV technology is China. In public service, China is even changing. All the buses are EV vehicles. The biggest manufacturer of EV batteries is a Chinese company called CATL. They are the biggest, again, holder of that technology associated with EV battery management. Here we are signing with the US. Why are we doing that? Do we want to shut that technology in China? Should that be our role? Should we be caught up in this fight between the US, China, and Russia? We shouldn't. We should learn from the history of our country and from Dr. Kaunda. So President Hakainde Hichilema has made grave errors in his national policy. The agreement signed between DRC, Zambia, and the US must be expunged. We call upon President Hakainde Hichilema to bring this agreement to Parliament, and Parliament, I think in its wisdom, will reject this MOU, which yokes us to the US, which yokes our resources to the US, which yokes this technology, that we can only develop this technology with the association of the United States. There should be a way in which we develop our technologies for the purposes of the free market. Whether it's South Africa that will buy our batteries, whether it's China or Russia or US, we should do it for the free market, not to the exclusion of others. We are being caught up in their conflict. Just 30 years ago, China was one of the developing countries. It wasn't even among the top 50 countries in the world. Today, China is the second biggest economy in the world, next to the US. You know, its space program has taken off. Its military might that is building has taken off. It is transitioning to becoming a superpower like Russia and the US. And the entire time our African presidents were there, the rhetoric was extremely bad because China was not missing from the US officials, how they have to curtail China's growth, how they have to remove China's influence on Africa. Africa is a friend of all. I've never heard China said we have to remove America's influence on Africa. No, they don't. Our largest trading partner is China for Zambia. Over $5 billion worth of our trade with China. It's our largest trading partner. But our largest bilateral partner in support is US. They give up to $500 million of support to our health sector. Zambia is comfortable with both without antagonizing the other. But the path that President Hakainde Hichilema has taken is a dangerous path. And like I said, I'm calling upon the decision to sign that MOU should be expunged. We should retreat from it. We should cancel that. Our agreement should be for the free market, not to the exclusion of any power. We don't want to be caught up in any entity. We don't want to be pawns to their fights. We are blessed as a nation. We will be a solution to the world with our copper and cobalt, manganese, because these are minerals that will drive this century that has come. And therefore, President Hakainde Hichilema should not jeopardize. Remember, President Hakainde Hichilema is the 7th president. He will go. We've had 6 others, they've gone. He will go. His decisions should be generational decisions. They should not be short-term decisions. His decisions should outlive him. Like President Kaunda, we are still benefiting from some of his policies. I want Zambians in the future to come and benefit from decisions of President Hakainde Hichilema, not to be imperiled by his decisions.
Okay. Let us open the phone lines. This is the interview, the first in the year 2023. Our guest is Patriotic Front presidential aspirant Emmanuel Mwamba. The numbers you are calling us on are 0953 448551, 0962 870921. Due to the fact that we're pressed for time, let us be quick and straight to the point. We are each allocated at least 30 seconds to exhaust our contribution. Good morning. Go straight to the point. Tell us your name and where you're calling us from. All right, thank you very much. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. What's your name and where are you calling us from? Please go on with your contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Leah. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Hello, good morning. Yeah, through to the interview. Good morning. Tasenza tabe bwino quickly choose Zinayan and go straight to the point.
Ndita ya mabalishani.
Thank you. Yeah, through to the interview. Good morning. A good morning to you too. Happy New Year. Tell us your name and where you're calling us from.
Good morning, my brother.
Please, you may go on with your contribution. Thank you. Repeat. Three more in the interest of time. We combine them, Ambassador.
Yes.
Hello, good morning. Good morning. Okay, thank you. What's your name and where are you calling us from?
My brother, good morning, Mabukabut.
All right. We said we need to conclude within 30 seconds. We need to exhaust our point. Thank you. Hello. Good morning. Endita Mwamba.
Endita Yamani Mwebani.
You have 30 seconds. Please go on. Thank you very much. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. 0953448551. Good morning. Hello, good morning. Good morning to you too. Happy New Year. Tell us your name and where you're calling us from. Your other name. Okay, quickly go on. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hello, good morning. Hello, good morning. Morning to you too. What's your name and where are you calling us from? Please go on with your contribution. Thank you. Thank you very much. What's your reaction to these calls and to the feedback?
Thank you very much. Let me go to these questions. And thank you, Mukwima. The radio station does have a flurry of listeners. This is very good, and we can tell from the many callers, even when you are cutting them, you know, they still want to speak, which is very, very good. That's a conversation we want. The first one says we are beggars, so we are at the mercy of the U.S. I wish to differ with him. We're a very wealthy nation, one of the wealthiest nations in the world. What has crippled our country partly is leadership. Leadership has been a crisis. That's why some of us have offered ourselves to leadership. Zambia is a wealthy country. It can benefit from its resources without being a beggar. We are beggars by choice, not by our, the opportunities that lie before us. We shouldn't be beggars. Leah says politicians are just liars, and he says UPND and PF are just in the same WhatsApp group, and and he says UPND is going, but he thinks that PF will never come back. Well, Mr. Leah, some of us have come to leadership to recognize that there has been a failure, especially in leadership. While we learn from our past leaders and our past presidents, there are things we can do better to restore the faith that our people should have in our leaders. In fact, our people wake up at 04 to go and vote. They really have so much faith in our leaders. So it's us leaders who disappoint our people. Our people really want a leadership that works. So yes, UPND is such a disappointment. They've been in power 17 months and there's nothing to show for it. Balanda Fietsungu. He says, the other one says, cost of living. I think this is a thread in everyone. Cost of living is the highest we've seen in 30 years. The price of goods and services, the highest we've seen. The solutions being provided by the UPND, IMF, and foreign investment. I have demonstrated again and again that this is not a solution to our country. We tried this in the 90s when our economy had collapsed. We had a huge debt of $7 billion, and we thought the IMF and foreign investment would resolve our crisis. It didn't. They are using the same method, not failing to learn from the past, failing to do something totally different to redeem our country. Mlenga Alex says, I'm explaining very well, and is disappointed with the vice president because he was at the hospital in Kapiri yesterday, and his patient has diarrhea, a diarrheal disease, and there was no ORS, there was no Panadol, there was no Flagyl for the infection, and he says he's very disappointed with the vice president. I agree entirely, and our vice president has been misled again and again. We see our answers in Parliament. Sometimes they're not well informed. Mr. Mianda, I like Mr. Mianda from Kabanana. Wherever I'm on any radio station, he calls and he says I should have a sense of shame. Mr. Mianda, yes, I'm part of the PF. Yes, I was part of the leadership, but I was an ambassador. I was serving outside the country for a period of 7 years. I only came back last year. I will not disown the PF. Like I celebrate their successes, I have to accept their mistakes. I will not say because I was distant from the leadership. I wasn't a head of state, I wasn't vice president, I wasn't a minister. I wasn't PS during the last 7 years. I've been an ambassador in South Africa. But collectively, when you are speaking collectively, I have to accept the mistakes the PF made. It is for that reason that I'm offering myself as a leader, because I think that we could have done better and we can do better. Voice of the Nation from Mundola. Well, he says, Parliament, President Hakainde Hichilema should not have signed this agreement without Parliament. And DRC, their President Sekedi, is also being blamed for the same thing, that he signed an agreement without approval of Parliament. I agree. In fact, our new constitution, the amendment done in 2016, compels government before they sign any national treaties, before they sign a national agreement, international agreements, that they are subjected to Parliament. You saw the other day, the Minister of Justice brought a document to Parliament for Zambia to ratify an international treaty. And it had to go through Parliament. He fought very hard that that treaty, he passes through Parliament. That's the way it should be. President Hakainde Hichilema is encouraged to bring whatever he did. Street Boy Simunenge says, you know, there was cadarism and we failed to pay debt. I think this is a matter of handled. And Simon Piri from Musakawe says people are not eating, there's a crisis. And this is attributable to many things. Partly the policies of monetary and fiscal policies of Ministry of Finance and Bank of Zambia. They believe in bringing the inflation rate to a single digit, and they've employed measures to do that. One of them is to restrict money supplies. So we have low inflation rate, not because people have capacity to spend, but because money supply is being restricted.
So you're saying it's artificial?
It is artificial. And you've heard, for example, on the exchange rate, where the Deputy Bank of Zambia governor disclosed that for the year (2021), they had spent 1.3 billion